Hi, my name is Justin and I'd like to welcome you to this, my first video in a series on data structures and algorithms in the C# language. Today I'm going to talk about arrays and how to use them. We'll go over the following topics: declaring and initializing arrays, setting and accessing array elements, multidimensional arrays, jagged arrays, and how to loop through an array to access elements of data within that array. When we're managing data that plays the same role in our program and all the pieces of data that we got are the same type, it's a really good idea to use an array. As you can see here, I have one data set that is integers 0 to 10, one set that is made up of alphabetic characters A to K, and then there's a list of names that are in the string data type. What we'll learn in this video is how we can take data sets like this and turn them into arrays. We'll also go over how you can access each element individually or cycle through the elements in the arrays that we're going to be creating. So arrays are declared using the following syntax. First, we'll put the data type, whether it's int, character, string, bool, or whatever data type that you're using. Next, we'll put the opening and closing brackets, and then the name of the array. Finally, a semicolon goes at the end, as it does with most lines of code that we write in C#. Okay, so let's look right at the first example. If you look here, string is our data type. So the first thing we do is we type in string, then the open and closing brackets, and then the name of the array, which in this case is names. At the end, we'll put a semicolon to finish the line. What that does is it declares an array, but it's not really useful to us yet. We're going to have to initialize it like we do here on the second line. Initialization determines the size of the array. Unlike some data structures that can function without a hard limit on size, arrays always have to be provided with a maximum capacity. This is something to consider when you're writing your program because you don't want the program to take up too much memory, but you also don't want to set such a tight limit on the array that it will not be able to handle the data that is assigned to it. In order for the array to really become functional, we add the second line, and that kind of caps it at 10, and now it's ready to be used. Of course, if you don't want to write 2 lines to get the array up and running like that, what you can do is you can do both the declaration and initialization of the array on the same line. And to do this, we type the data type, in this case string, and then the open and close curly brackets, then the name of the array, in this case names, then the equal sign, and on the right of the equal sign we put the word new, the data type once again, and the open and closing brackets with the size inside. There are times when you're going to want to declare, instantiate, and assign data to an array all in one statement. And you can do this in C# using an initialization list. So here, I type string, the data type, followed by brackets, then names, which is the name of the array. Then we'll put the equal sign, we'll put the data type, just like we did in the last slide. However, instead of putting the size of the array within brackets, we'll leave them empty. And we're going to put some curly brackets at the end of the line. And within the curly brackets, we're going to put each item that we want in the array separated by a comma. When you declare an array like this, you don't have to specify the number of elements. The compiler is going to infer how many elements that the array needs, judging by the number of items that we have on the list. Arrays use indexes to access the collection of elements, and the index starts from 0. Then 1, then 2. That means if you have an array that's filled with 10 items of data, the last element in the array is going to be index 9. It's kind of confusing to anyone who's new to computer science, because generally in math we count the first item as 1, not a 0. But it's something that you're going to get used to as you go along. Let's look at this first example here. It's pretty simple. As you can see, the first element at index 0 is Tim, then John at index 1, and Mike at index 2. So what would we do if we wanted to perform an action with Mike? This is where arrays really shine. Accessing the data within an array is instantaneous, and all we need to do is type the array name with brackets around the index. So if we type string my name equals names and then the brackets around 2, it's going to set the value of that string my name to Mike. So what do we do if we want to change the value of the third element in the array? It's even simpler. All we have to do is type names and then brackets around the number 2 equals, and then quotation marks around the word Raymond to indicate that it's a string type. Now, Mike has been changed and updated to Raymond. Okay, so let's get crazy here. What if I were to tell you you can make an array out of arrays? It's really mind-blowing, I know, but let's continue here with our example. We got a case where each row is an array, and is also an element for another larger array. In this way, it kind of forms a two-dimensional array, and two-dimensional arrays are often used to model matrices. When you create a multidimensional array, you always create a structure that has the same number of elements in each of the rows. So it's always going to have a rectangular shape. And in this case of our example here, it's kind of 4 by 4 like a square. Multidimensional arrays are declared by providing the upper bound of each of the dimensions of the array. Just like a regular array, you can declare a multidimensional array without specifying the dimension bounds. To do this, you use commas to specify the number of dimensions. For example, int, and then opening bracket, and then a comma, and then the right bracket, and then a space, and then sales for the name of the array, and semicolon. After that, you have to later specify those bounds. You can put sales equals new int bracket 4, comma 4, and then the closing bracket. And what that's going to do is it's going to make the matrix 4 rows and 4 columns. Multidimensional arrays can be initialized with an initialization list, just like a regular array could be. If you look at this statement, each element in the array is another array, and each element in the row is separated with a comma. So we have int, and then open bracket, comma, close bracket, grades, which is the name of the array, equals new int, open bracket, comma, close bracket. Then we have a curly brace, another curly brace within which we have our first row in the multidimensional array. Those 5 elements of data, a closing curly brace, then a comma, and then the following 3 rows. So getting a multidimensional array element and setting a multidimensional array element is really similar to what we did with the one-dimensional array. It's just that you need to specify the index for each dimension. There might be cases where you want an array which isn't a perfect rectangle. For instance, what if you're tracking sales of every day of the month, and as we all know, some months have 31 days, where other months have 30 or 28 days. So that's where jagged arrays come in. A jagged array is an array of arrays where each row of the array is made up of an array. We call it jagged because the number of elements in each row might be different. A picture of a jagged array might not be square or rectangular like the multidimensional array that we saw earlier, kind of have jagged edges like like if we were to look at the profile of a key. A jagged array is declared by putting two sets of brackets around the array variable name. The first set of brackets indicates the number of rows in the array. The second set of brackets is left blank. This marks the place for the one-dimensional array that is stored in each row. Normally, the number of rows is set to an initialization list in the declaration statement. For example, 3 in this case for jagged. Once the jagged array is declared, the elements of the individual row arrays can be assigned with values similar to the two-dimensional array. Now, it's a very common thing to loop through an array in order to access every array element using a for loop. If you're not familiar with for loops, looping through an array is an ideal circumstance to get to know them. Here we see that the for loop has 3 parts. Each is divided with a semicolon: the initializer, the condition, and the iterator. Now what happens is it will check the condition to see if the condition is true, and if the condition is true, it's going to go through the loop until the condition is no longer true, and then it will stop. The iterator section defines what happens after each loop. In this case, it adds 1, so it's going to start at index 0 and proceed through the loop until it gets to the end of the array. So first, what we're going to do here is we're going to declare an integer named total sales. We're going to assign 0 to total sales. We also declare and initialize an integer array, sales, with 4 elements. What we're looking to do is to go through the array and add each element to the total sales variable that we have. What that's going to do is by the end of the loop, we're going to have all the numbers added together. The first section of our for loop here, the initializer, makes it clear that we're starting with an index of 0. It says I equals 0. The second part of the for loop, the condition, sets the limit as to how many times we're going to loop through this. In this case, we use the length function to tell the loop to stop after 4 cycles. The third section, the iterator, shows how we're going to be adding to the index. In this case, we're going to add 1 for each loop that goes through the for loop. So on the first loop, 82 will be added to total sales, followed by 74, 89, and finally 100 on the second, third, and final 4th loop. Let's do the same for multidimensional arrays. First, we'll declare the integer named total sales, assign 0 to total sales. Then we're going to declare and initialize a two-dimensional array, sales, with 4 rows and 4 columns. We're going to loop through using I. That's going to go through the rows, and then when we loop through each row, each column will be looked at with J. So this is going to be a for loop within a for loop. This way, we add elements from each row and each column to the total value of total sales. This is the introduction for arrays and how to use them, and I hope you really enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you would like to learn more about programming, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.